Lots of entrepreneurs, especially online, sound like AI when they speak. And this is actually a good thing, because that means that it's never been easier if you want to get ahead of 99% of your competition, stand out, and make more money as a result. Because all that you have to do is leverage just two things with your speech. And I'm going to break down exactly what those are and how you can do that in this video. Because focus on most people and how they don't actually improve their speech or focus on improving their speech, even though it's the most utilized tool that they use in their work and in their daily life. So by watching this video, you've already given yourself an invisible edge over the rest. Because with AI generated content becoming more and more common online these days, the people who focus on this skill will stand out, and the people who don't will be left behind and sound increasingly more and more like AI. Now, if you're wondering who is this guy, why should I listen to him? My name is Nick Lutalo, and I've studied communication for the better part of this decade, going from sounding awkward and soft-spoken to sounding like how I do now, speaking on camera and on content comfortably, and even going on stage and performing. And now I help others make the same transformation in their speech for their businesses so that they can uncap their income. Now, let's get into what I mean by people actually sounding like AI when they speak. So do I mean that these people sound like literal robots when they talk? Some people actually do, but that's not what I mean. I mean that they use what's called their default voice. And if you're listening, you might go like, wait, their default voice, the voice that they use when they're just speaking normally without thinking about it. And that is exactly what I mean. Now let me explain why. You see, when people use their default voice, when they don't think about how they want to sound before they speak, you're gonna fall back on the things and the habits that you have based on the situation that you're in. So your default voice when you're speaking to a client or speaking to a viewer is gonna be very different from your default voice from when you're speaking to your mom. And this is very important as a detail, because this is what actually makes you sound like AI when you speak. Because there's certain habits and patterns that you picked up that you think are useful for you and that you think make you have more authority or more rapport. But it's actually taking away from both of those things. So one of the things that I see is that maybe people will speak in a way that's more monotone, and they might take away from all of the emotions that they have when they speak. So some people might do that as a way of building authority because they think that the only way for them to sound authoritative is for them to speak in a way that's very, very serious. Maybe they're concerned that they won't be taken seriously, and that's why they do that. Maybe it's because they're younger, maybe they're in their 20s, and they feel like people might not want to buy from someone who's in their 20s unless they speak in a very serious and monotone way. Maybe they're mimicking someone who sounds authoritative. Maybe they watched a bunch of Alex Hormozi videos and picked up on only the parts where he's talking very, very, very serious. Or maybe they're very introverted, and because of that, that makes them speak very soft-spoken, or maybe they're a little bit awkward because they're afraid of putting themselves out there, they're afraid of speaking in content, or afraid of getting on a sales call. There's so many different things that in the moment you might think make you sound more authoritative, but it actually takes away from it. Why doesn't speaking in, say, a monotone way or speaking in your default way actually build authority? Here's a few reasons. If you're speaking monotone, you sound, well, emotionless. That's the whole point of monotone. And when I say monotone, some people might think, oh yeah, like it's gonna sound like this, and I don't speak like this, I don't speak like a robot. The thing is, you don't speak with very much variation or very much diversity in the way that you speak. And this is what creates that monotone sound, even if it's not your intention. And when you speak in a way that's emotionless, well, what makes people people? It's emotions. So when you're emotionless, there's no person to connect to. So that not only hurts the rapport that you build in a conversation, because it seems like the person that you're speaking to can just only pick up on the fact that you're a brick wall. But then on top of that, it makes it so that you sound as if you don't care what you're talking about, or don't care about what you're talking about. It's the same thing if you're soft-spoken or you're badly articulated. There's no way that you stand out. There's nothing to remember. The best speakers have a very unique style to their speech. It doesn't mean that they have to go over the top and try their best to be this performative, ridiculous character that's a comedian in every single situation, because again, there's a time and a place. But what a lot of people will do is that they make it so that there's nothing to remember about their speech. And it makes everything that they say, no matter how much value is in the actual words that they say, it makes it less impactful. You can say the exact same words and have so much more impact and influence if you know how to speak and articulate it in the right way. The value being there isn't enough. It's about how you communicate it. And the worst part about this is that if you have fears or limiting beliefs that are causing this, like being afraid of, say, sounding salesy or too excited, or maybe you're afraid of people not taking you seriously, and afraid is a strong word, maybe it's even just a mild concern. If you have these thoughts in the back of your head, people sense it subconsciously through your communication without you even realizing it. Because when we speak, 90% of our communication is in here. It's nonverbal. So when you have beliefs like that in the back of your head when you speak, and that's what's informing the default voice that you have, that's what's informing the monotone sound or the soft-spoken sound or whatever it is that you have, it makes it so that when you speak, people subconsciously pick on it or pick up on it because they see the micro expressions or they see the slight changes in your voice or your tone or in the word choice that you have. And even though you don't realize it, and maybe they don't realize it consciously, they'll pick up on it and they'll be like, there's something off about this person. Or maybe they'll be like, I don't think this person knows what they're talking about. Or I'm gonna go with somebody else who seems more convicted. This is why improving your communication and not using your default voice is so important. Because I see so many online entrepreneurs and they'll go on YouTube especially and they'll record a video and it's just sounding like this. And it feels like there's no person there. It feels like there's nothing to work with. So this is what we want to avoid. So a big question that you might get from hearing this is, well, shouldn't you just be yourself? Because you don't want to put on some persona or something like that that isn't you when you're in your content or when you're on a call. And exactly, you do want to be yourself. The thing is, your default voice isn't actually yourself. You see, I actually learned this outside of the context of this speaking skills and even a business. I learned this from when I first started singing in front of other people. Because what I've found over the years is that there was a lot from my experience performing that translated over into my speaking skills. And it was when I started singing for the first time in front of other people, when I would go on stage, I would be a completely different person from how I was when I was just by myself. When I was by myself and I was practicing and singing, whether I was just practicing with my guitar and just chilling, I would be so much more confident, so much more charismatic, even if there was no one I was doing it for. And I would just be having a good time, enjoying myself, being very chill, smooth. I wasn't some person that's extremely over the top in performances. You can probably tell that through my personality here. But I was having a good time. It was smooth. But when I would go on stage, I would freeze up. I wouldn't know my notes sometimes. I would mess up. I would have times where I was shaky or I would just do random movements to try and make myself seem less awkward. And I would even have times where I would not even hold the mic close enough to my mouth so they couldn't even pick up on what I was saying. So I'll be extremely soft-spoken, even in singing. And that's the interesting part about that, because I wasn't consciously thinking about that when I was on stage. And I wasn't even consciously thinking about being the best singer when I was at home. So what was the difference? It was the default. It was the environment that I was in, and that was what was informing the behaviors that I had. So my actual default self was the authentic version of me who was by myself in my room with my guitar just chilling. But that version of me was taken away when I was put in the context of an onstage environment where there's dozens to hundreds of people watching. And that's the big difference. Because a lot of the time you lose that authentic version of yourself when you're put in a high stakes situation. Maybe you're recording a video, maybe you're on a coaching call, or maybe you're helping someone to make a good decision as to whether or not to buy your product. Whatever it is, when you are in these high stakes situations, or high stakes situations, because they're really not that high stakes, it just seems like it in your head. That's what creates the change, and that's what we need to fix right here. So how can you use more of that authentic voice, the voice that you maybe not have even ever heard yourself, and make it more engaging and make it more dynamic in a way that sets you apart when you speak and makes your speech more impactful? The first thing is to use variation in your speech. So what do I mean by that? I mean that you should utilize as many different aspects as you can of your speech or of your voice to make it so that it's more dynamic. So this would be playing with tempo, how fast you're speaking and how slow you're speaking. Playing with the volume, how loud you're speaking or how quiet you're speaking. Playing with the emotion in your speech, using different emotions, say concern or excitement in your speech. And then also playing with the pitch. Maybe you might want to make your voice lower at some points to emphasize a point. So this all sounds very simple. You might go like, well, yeah, I do this. And yes, you do this normally in most casual situations where you're not thinking about it very much and you're just having a good time. You'll do this without thinking about it. But when you leverage it and you know what each part actually does and what purpose it serves, then you can use it for your advantage to make your points hit a lot harder than they otherwise would have and leave a lasting mark in people's minds after you speak. So for right now, let's talk about the tempo of your speech. So one thing that you can do here is, for example, say you're someone who speaks a little bit faster than most people do. One thing that you can do is when you really want to emphasize a point, when you really want to make something stick, you can be speaking really, really fast and then you can slow down. And then when you slow down, people hear that difference and it's a bit of a pattern interrupt. And then now they want to hear what you're going to say more. And you can use that at the end of a sentence where you really want something to stick, where you're making your big main points. Or maybe you want to create a lot of buildup for that slowdown. So maybe if you're not someone who speaks very fast, you start speaking up very, very fast to almost build it up and then you crash it down by slowing down a little bit. That's one thing that you can do. Or if you really want to emphasize a lot of excitement when you speak, then just speak a little bit faster. It's about leveraging pattern interrupts. So when you change the way that you're speaking, changing the tempo, that's what creates something that will get people to listen because it's not what you're used to hearing from that person. So again, we can apply this to volume. If you want to make a point really, really hit, then you can either raise your voice if you're really in a very emotional state when you're speaking, for example. If you're very excited, you can raise your voice and shout, or you can quiet down and speak very softly. And then when you do that, people lean in to hear what you're going to say. And it has more dramatic effect. Now I'm doing these in very exaggerated ways for it to hit a little bit harder for the video. But even just using a subtle version of this in your speech, in a call, or in a video, will hit so much harder than if you just said it straight up like this without actually using any kind of tool in your speech to make it hit harder. So, another thing that you can use is emotion, making sure that you have different emotions behind the words that you say. Why is this important? Because one, it makes people not just hear the words that you're saying, but they feel it. And that's what makes such a massive difference. when you have people feel the emotions behind what you're saying, then they interact with the words that you're saying on two levels: the actual value level, the things that you're actually saying, and then on top of that, on the emotional level. And then when you're hitting it from two different areas, then people connect with it a lot more, and they're more likely to remember it and remember you as more influential, more authoritative. But then on top of that, another thing behind using emotion behind your speech is that you can guide people into the emotions that you want them to be feeling. So if if you use more of a, say, concerned tone when you speak, if you want the other person to be feeling concerned, if you're in good rapport with this person and you speak like this, then they'll pick up on that too and they'll start to feel that emotion. So it's a very powerful tool. It's very simple in the sense that, well, yeah, if you use a certain emotion when you speak, the other person will pick up on it. But even though it's something that's very obvious, people don't utilize it to their advantage when they speak. Now, this isn't meant to be in a manipulative way, but it's meant to make it so that people can better understand what you're saying. So if you want someone to be angry because, say, they're doing something that's maybe easily fixable and it's costing them a lot of money, then speaking in a way where you sound a little bit agitated, not so much where it sounds over the top, but where you're just a little bit, you can tell you're mildly annoyed on their behalf, they'll start to feel that too and they'll go like, okay, let's change this, let's fix this right now. And then outside of emotion, another thing that you can play with is the pitch. So one thing that I like to do, just because I have a deeper voice, is if I really, really want to make a point feel weighty or weighted, then what I'll do is make my voice deeper at the end of the sentence. For example, no, I'm not going to give an example, I just gave it right there. But that's a great thing that you can use as well. Another thing you can do is make your voice higher, lower, and just playing with the pitch overall throughout the sentence, making your voice have more melody to it. It makes it feel like it's more fluid, more engaging to listen to than if you just kept it monotone the whole way through. So this doesn't always have to be to emphasize a point. It can just be to make it so that people can actually pay attention to what you're saying compared to the normal monotone way that will make people lose attention because they have horrible attention spans these days. The best part about using all of these is that when you do it deliberately, over time, you can develop your own unique speaking style that fits you. And when you have that, people have almost a vocal signature that they apply to you when you speak. And when you do that, it makes it so that you're a lot more memorable and people like to hear you speak because you have a specific way that you make them feel and they just don't know what it is. But having that on top of the value that you already bring, because I'm assuming you're probably a pretty capable person if you're watching this, you have good expertise in whatever your field is. Say you teach, say you taught people how to teach or how to use a guitar. And you spoke like that, using all different kinds of variation, using tempo, volume, emotion, pitch in their speech. That person will be so much more interesting of a guitar coach than the other guy who's just giving the value alone. It's like packaging, it's like marketing. So this is just one thing that you can do to improve your communication. So if you're an entrepreneur or content creator who's looking to leverage these skills in your business to be able to uncap your income and help people more, then click the link in the description and I'll personally help you with that. Now, outside of that, let's focus on another aspect of your speech that you can leverage to make it so that you sound less like AI and you're more engaging with the people that you speak to. And this thing is somewhat similar to the last points, but it's a different way of approaching it. And this is mirroring your speaking style. So what does this actually do? It helps you to build rapport so much faster with anybody that you speak to. And this is such a powerful tool because, like we talked about before, everyone has their own default way of speaking. They have specific patterns that they use, words they like to use, techniques they like to use. So when you mirror that and speak their language literally, it makes them like you more, not because they're consciously thinking, oh wow, this person's speaking in the way that I'm speaking, They probably won't even notice. Most of the time they won't. But what they will notice subconsciously is that this person is like me. And in general, we like people who are like us because we feel like those people can understand us better. And when it feels like people understand us better, we're more open to what they have to say, we like them more, and we're a lot more able to be influenced by them. So, how do you utilize this in your speech? So say for example, you're speaking to someone, maybe you're on a call with them, and they speak faster than the average person does. Speed up your rate of speech for a little bit when you speak to them. Or say they use a specific word a lot in their speech. Maybe they like the word articulate and they go like, oh yeah, I love to articulate it in this way. Oh yeah, I love the way that you articulated that. And they say that over and over and over again. Then you can use that word yourself. You can go like, yeah, I think it's interesting when you articulate it like this. And then when you do that, they'll hear that word and they're like, oh, this person also uses that word too. They're not going to think that in their head, like consciously, but in the back of their mind, they'll notice that this person speaks like I do. Do you see why this is so powerful? It's almost as if, say you flew to another country, say your native language was English, but you went there and they don't speak English in that country. And you go throughout your entire trip speaking the country's native language, and then you run into someone else that speaks English. Even if that person's English is not good, you're gonna love that person and you're gonna speak to them forever. Not forever, but for a while. And then by the time you're done with that conversation, the next time you have a conversation with that person, it could be in English or it could even be in the other language, but the rapport is already built. And that's why this is so powerful, because a lot of people might go like, well, shouldn't you just be yourself? Shouldn't you not try and change yourself in every single situation to try and be at the whims of other people? And yes, the thing is, you only have to do this in the initial interaction with the person, or even in the beginning of an interaction with someone else. After that, you can go and speak how you normally would, because the rapport is already built. So the way that you can tell when you've really built the rapport with the other person is when they start to mirror your own speech, or maybe they start to mirror your body language. Because a lot of the time in conversations, people lead each other when they're in rapport, so they'll take turns. So for example, say I mirror someone's speaking patterns, maybe I mirror their tempo. Then after a while, maybe they start to mirror my body language, maybe my arms are crossed, they cross their arms. And then maybe I mirror something that they're doing, then they mirror something that I'm doing, and you go back and forth, you lead each other, you take turns. So when you see that that's happening, you can tell that you're in rapport with the person. And then that means that you don't have to continue to not put on a face, but you don't need to continue to consciously try your best to mirror this person in their speech. So if you try this in just your next conversation, it doesn't even have to be in a business conversation, it could be with literally anybody. You'll notice that you have more rapport with that person a lot easier than you otherwise would have. And when you go about consciously doing this, it becomes something that over time you naturally do, and it becomes a superpower. You become this magnetic person, and people wonder, why is that person so charismatic? And it's because you implemented this. So if you use mirroring in your speech, and then on top of that, you adding variation to your speech, knowing when to use each different aspect of your speech, which should be all of the time, then it makes it so that one, you can build rapport easy, but then two, you can also make it so that your voice is engaging and that it markets your value so much better than if you just said it straight up. So ultimately, this is how you build a personal brand, whether you're posting content or not. It's about not just the value that you bring to the table, it's how you deliver and market that value through your speech and through the words and the way that you say it. So implementing these two simple tips will make you a way better communicator and sound way less like AI than the rest of your competition. Check out the description if you want fast help improving your communication for your business. But then outside of that, I hope you have a great rest of your day. I hope this was helpful. And remember, don't overthink it. You're a lot better at speaking than you think that you are.